Hi, I'm Krunker Ninja, and this is my tutorial on how to make Krunker models in Blender. So the first thing we're going to do is download and open up Blender, obviously. So of course, I'm going to turn on screencast key so you can see what I'm pressing. I have the default, the 2.7 keybinds in place. So if you're just starting out and you select the newer ones, you're going to get a different keybinds to the ones that I have here. So this is the 2.7 keybinds. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up the character or character 2. The difference between these, and these files will be linked in the description, is character 2, when you move it around, it has very much rigid motion. Like, it's very to the normal Krunker art style. Some people like that, some people don't. Character 1, or just character normal, was the first one I made. The skins work the exact same way, but it's more curvy. Some people like that. Some people, if they see this, they're basically gonna vomit. It's all to personal preference. So for this example, because more people like character 2, is I'm going to be using character 2. So what you're going to do is you're going to open it. You're going to just, it's already going to have everything selected, so you just hit Control C to copy, or if you're on Mac, Command C. Please note that Mac commands or Mac shortcuts are slightly different, so if something doesn't work, you're just going to have to look it up. So Control and New General Project, A, X, delete. Turn back on screencast keys, even though it says it's on. So now we just paste this back in, and there we go. There's our character. So you don't see anything. By default, what you're going to see is like a purple character, like it's going to be purple. So if we go in somewhere in my settings, you're going to get a purple character, and that's because the texture isn't properly set. The texture for this is technically, if you put it outside of the folder and then have it with a certain name, all of the textures will be in the description as well in a zip file. Those are the ones I currently made. I didn't make all of them yet. Why? Because I just don't have a use for all of them at the moment. So what you're going to do is you're going to come up here into the shading tab if yours is purple. If it's not purple, then you're a psychic and you put it in the right folders automatically. You're going to come over to the shading. You're going to go down to here. This is called the shader nodes editor, and this is a image node. The image node is saying is it's putting its texture onto the texture of the material. This is just like a middle ground, giving it some nice whatever. You really don't need to directly go into there, but it's always nicer. I mean, it looks a little bit nicer, I don't know. But what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to click on this folder icon to open an image. For this example, let's just do Vantablack skin. So here, you're not going to see anything. The reason why you're not seeing anything is that currently Blender says, hey, we're just going to put to the solid view. The solid view is whatever's in this viewport display down here. You can change that if you want. You really don't need to. You can make it colorful or everything. But what you do is you press Z. It's going to open up this thing. Please note that I'm still holding Z. And then you can select one of the things. Render view is going to be like how you would actually see it. Material viewport is probably the best if you don't have any lighting in. So now let's get into how would you move around the character. Also, I'm moving around the scene with the middle mouse button to focus in on whatever. You press the numpad 0, mouse wheel goes in and out, middle mouse buttons move around, right click as far as my keybinds are. It might be left click for you, but as far as my keybinds are, it's a right click. Now what you do is you press Control Tab. Control Tab is toggle pose mode. As if you're selecting this bone structure. This is called an armature. So once you're selecting this bone structure, you just press Control and press Tab, and you go into this little mode where you can select every single bone. Now, there are there are only about like a couple of bones that you actually need to mess with. If you mess with any of the bones that I'm selecting right now, stuff will go badly. Ignore that one. But if you mess with these bones, if you're trying to move them around, you could actually mess something up and you might have to re-import. Everything else is fine to move around. Now what you'll see is that this right here is basically like your hand. So it's this thing coming out, it's your hand. Also for reference, your character is facing this way. It might seem weird because the toes are facing out that way, but it's actually facing that way. Why are the toes like this? I don't know. You can just press RZ 180 to flip it around. But now that I've gotten used to it, like I can't go back. By the way, R is to rotate. Z just locks it to the Z-axis. That would also go for anything else. Red is for the X-axis, Y-axis, Z-axis, up and down. If you've used most 3D programs before, the Z-axis is where the Y-axis is, like the Y and the Z-axis are flipped around. For Blender, for whatever reason, they decide that they want to have the Z on the vertical, which is just something else to get used to. It was something I had to get used to when I was first starting out with Blender. But that's besides the point. So if we select this bone, we can press G. G is the shortcut to move, and we can move this bone around and the hand goes to where it is. Now that's all fine and dandy, but you see that the elbow is pointing like downwards. It's not, and it's even going into it. This is where this bone that comes out goes in. So this bone that is outwards is basically like, pretend that it's where it's looking at. So that, like, this is the face of it, and this is where it's looking at. So what we do is we move this around, and it'll move where this is located, which is pretty helpful, which can allow you to do something and like this. Now, another crucial element is that you'll see that this is not very intuitive. Like, you're moving things around, but they're not really moving around how you would like them to. This is because it's like it moves on the plane parallel to what you're facing. So say, like, put an imaginary plane that goes exactly parallel to wherever you're facing, and that's the plane that moves across. To do it on a specific axis, just like with rotate, we do G and then specify an axis. For this example, I'm going to do Y on the Y-axis, so I'm moving it around simply on the Y-axis. If you press Shift in that axis, then you move it on everything except for that axis. And Alt-G is how you would reset the position. So let's just reset the position of everything here, and let's talk about how you would do stuff with a model, like a weapon. So for this example, let's do the super default that everybody's already done before. Let's decide to choose the sniper rifle, specifically the AWP. So this is going to become what I'm in here is called Krunker Essential Assets. Is in the Krunker Design Hub Discord server, which will also be linked in the description, where you can find all of these assets. It's a really good place to get literally everything. So if we go in here, weapons, sniper, op, weapon1.obj. Now everything turns white and you can kind of see something. The reason for this is that as far as the OBJ thinks, it thinks that it's on a scale of 0.01. Blender, for whatever reason, didn't decide to import that scale. It's actually in like the file and everything. So what we have to do is we have to do it manually. So to scale something, there are two different ways you can do it. You can come here into the object properties, which is in this properties menu, and you can manually set the scale over here on all of the axes, or you can do it over here in what's called the viewport and press S and then just type a number. For this example, which is basically how it's supposed to be, it's 0.001. If you want to get more specific, it's 0.0189 something, but 0.001. Now, this is here, this is fine and dandy, but if we're in our armature and we decide that we want to move it here, it's going to be really difficult to put this sniper and by the way, I press numpad 1 to go to this side view in orthographic, 3, 7, so, and then pressing 9 flips the view. Just some helpful shortcuts to look at things, but this is really difficult to line up, and then especially the rotation. If you want this to like rotate or something, I don't know, it's just going to be difficult. So to save ourselves that hassle, what we do instead is we go here into the object constraints. The constraints I remember because it looks like a rubber band around this is like constraining this thing. I don't know, somebody was an intellectual and decided to do that. So in here, add object constraint, and we want to put a relation of a child of. We basically want to say that this is child to the armature's hand. So if we now move around to the armature, or what's known as the bone, this is all fine and dandy. So I don't even know why I use that phrase. So bone, so now it's here, and we can try to move it around, but that doesn't solve the fact that it's not on this bone. So this bone, I didn't even name it, but this is bone 9. Bone 9 is basically where the hand is. This is bone 5, bone 4, but bone 9 and bone 10 are the ones that you want to know, because this is bone 9 and this is bone 10. So if we come back over to the object properties, you'll see that we can select a certain bone. So the bone that we're going to select is bone 9 because that's the right hand, and we can then do RZZ, which would do, wait, no, not R, GZZ, which does on the local Z-axis, GYY for a local Y-axis. You can also change these locals over here. And so now what I'm going to do is rotate it. So wait, I've basically memorized these numbers at this point. I say I memorized the numbers and then I just messed it up. But here we go. Here it is, and then we can do G shift YY. Okay, G shift ZZ. And just move that around until it's about there. Now this looks stupid. Let's be honest here. This looks stupid. Because if you're having something as heavy as a sniper rifle in your hand, it's gonna look stupid. So to fix this problem, I mean, this is just personal advice at this point, but you just move your actual bone over, rotate this. I'm pressing RZ, just walk to the Z axis, move this over, and then we can finally move the hand there. Basically, just you want a rough position for the most part, and then move your actual thing. If at any point I'm talking too fast, you're on YouTube, you can slow things down. I think that this looks pretty good, but right now it's pretty white. Why is it white? Because that's the texture that it has. It's just a pure base white, and we don't have any image to it. So let's go over to the shading to add an image. Now, to add things in Blender, it doesn't matter where it is, it's basically a universal hotkey. You press Shift and A. Shift A brings up this little menu to add. I never go down the menus unless I'm like just browsing for something. Just search, press IM for an image texture, and you got yourself an image. Then we would link the color of our image texture to the color of the material. It's going to be black because by default Blender sets all images to black. We can put it to like this fancy black skin, but that's not even going to look right. But so do the same thing. We open up that new folder icon, go into our recents, up here in our recents, and then weapon1.png, default weapon skin. Alright, this looks pretty fine now. Now, over here, I'm also pressing Shift to multi-select. So, to select multiple things at once, you just press Shift. Now, when you're dealing with the feet, note that these are the ones that you want to move. To deal with the feet, you want to move them up. So press G, Z, and move them up slightly. Because if you don't move them up, and start trying to move them around, then like, come on, that looks weird. Come on, I don't want to say that looks weird. Like GX, and now it's just looking like it's out. But if we GZ, That looks a little bit more natural, pardon the fact they apparently need to go to the bathroom. So, just by messing around a little bit, GX, GZ, you can start positioning it, and now you might think that you're pretty done for the most part. So, Control Tab switches between your pose mode and your edit mode. So, you can tell that you're in object mode, not edit mode. You can tell that you're in object mode because the entire armature is selected, you can't select any individual bones, and in fact you can actually select these bits. Control Tab again, you can select all of your different bones. Now, if we go into rendered view, this looks pretty okay. And okay is a pretty okay term. So, let's add some things. Remember from that shortcut from the shader how we used to add an image here? We want to do the same thing here. So, Shift A, and it'll instantly do this mesh. You can do all of these different things. You can look down, and I've like never used like half of these things here. Force fields are cool when you're getting into smokes and stuff, but that's not part of the conversation. So what we want to do is we want to add a plane. Why do we want to add a plane? I don't know. Just give it some floor. S, and then just drag to scale it up. Just note that you can drag for anything. Yeah, just S, scale, drag it up to however you want. GZ, make it look like he's actually standing on top and not hovering above. And let's add in our camera. So Shift A camera. Why do we need to re-add a camera? It's because we deleted the camera earlier when we deleted everything in the scene. If you kept all that stuff, you're still fine. And now what I'm doing is I'm pressing Control, not Control Alt Space, Control Alt and numpad 0. Now, in the event that any of the numpad keys do not work, or you do not have a numpad, what you want to do is you want to go into Edit, Preferences, Input, and Enable Numpad. It will basically mimic, it's useful for laptops as it says, but it will basically mimic the idea of your 1 to 9 as if they were the actual numpad. So here, it's actually useful to press G and not select anything. So let's come over here, and you can press Shift and middle mouse button to move around like this, and if you just get lost over here, just select anything over here on this, what is this even called? The editor, what? Editor type? Outliner? Alright. But you basically just select anything on this outliner and press numpad period. Numpad period is a super helpful thing. It basically gets you lost, and if you're zoomed out into oblivion, it also gets you back. So let's say I want to put the camera here-ish. So I press Control Alt, numpad 0, and that brings the camera to it. Numpad 0, by the way, is the short key to switch your viewport to the viewport of the camera, so you can see what the camera sees. Now for this example, I'm going to press G and Y to move this around. And in our scene, this is particularly personal preference, but I like to put my scene all black by just setting the strength of the natural light to 0. Now everything's black, you can't see anything, don't get any racist jokes, please don't. Comment section, I already know you're doing that. So Z material preview, this is why it's still useful, because you don't have to deal with the world of the scene. Now let's just add a light, and let's do a spotlight. Then go into 7, Y7, or the top-down view. Y7, I find 7 pretty useful for stuff like this. Then, like, 3, over numpad 3. And we can put where it's pointing at by clicking on this, and then just dragging it over to where you want it to point at. So now let's go back into our render view, and nothing. Why does it show nothing, you might be asking? Well, that's because this isn't a powerful enough light. So let's just bring this up to 1000, and that looks pretty okay. A single light doesn't help much, so let's add 2. And let's just put this down to like a 750. Go back into our camera view, and we can press F12. F12 is the universal render key. Control F12 would be to render an animation, and we can see some things right off the bat. What we can see is that this bit isn't really lit up. This is now just going into GNU designing to do stuff. If for whatever reason you have any problems, feel free to DM me on Discord. Do not go into the comment section. I will not read the comment section. So just DM me on Discord. My Discord is down in the video description. Again, we're almost at 20 minutes. Come on, guys, you can do this, and this is enough for an example. Then again, press space. Space is what is for the 2.8. I know it's, or the 2.7 shortcuts. I know it's different for the 2.8. I just set my shortcuts to this, but space or whatever it would be, to bring up this little menu here, and we can just type save as, and we can save it as an image. You can put that wherever you want, put it into Photoshop or GIMP or anything, and mess with it how you want. And I think that would conclude this tutorial. If you have any questions, DM me on Discord. Do not try to contact me via the comment section. Another thing is, you do want to save your project. You want to save it pretty frequently. I just didn't for this entire time because I'm a bad example. I'm also like the only person who uses Blender with a free asset that I made myself. So once again, thanks for watching, I guess. If you have any problems, if you want, oh, no, I forgot about something. Hats and back items. Hats and back items is basically the same process. Just go File, Import, OBJ, into, it's actually not in Krunker Essential Assets, which kind of sucks, but, ignore the title of that. Let's say we want to add a hat. Let's do 32, which I know off the top of my head is a TV-tron. Over into our object constraints child of object child of armature, and this is the head, and it looks pretty weird. That is fine. Another thing is to click this. Let's go back into our material render. So clicking this will bring up this little cool gizmo. Over here you can select it to the local, which will give you a good sense of what to modify. So RXX -90, RZZ just normal Z -90, and our TV-tron is on our head. That's all fine, but it's still white. Image texture, open, hats, 63, there's a couple of them, there's 62, there's a couple of them, so let's choose 62.4, which I hope isn't the LCD, it's the LCD, 32.5 is the other LCD, oh god. This is making me look like an idiot now. Let's just do normal 32. So 32.png, which is actually the one that I have. We can scale this down a little bit so that way it looks nice. Now, quick things you also want to do. You want to click on the, you actually want to enable ambient on collision, bloom, and space screen reflections. What do each of these do, you might be asking? Ambient on collision is pretty good for making a little bit of depth to your scene. This scene already doesn't have that much depth to it, but if you notice, like around here, when I'm toggling ambient on collision, you can actually see kind of the depth in that, especially in a material preview. What bloom does is it makes things lighter. Like if light is shining on it, it'll make it lighter, kind of like how you would naturally expect. Like for example, right over here, that gets a little bit brighter. Screen space refractions is this basically the same thing as doing a bunch of light bounces without having to switch your render engine to cycles, which is the more realistic but taxing on your system. And I don't want to tax my system when I'm also recording. So bloom, screen space reflections, I meant, jeez, and ambient on collision. And what you also might think is, what about the emissive material? So Shift D is another shortcut, which would be to duplicate. So we're going to duplicate this, and we're going to go to 32E. Doesn't exist on here, of course it doesn't, but in the event that it did exist, and I'm not looking like an idiot, a good example would probably be the Alien Blaster. There's an E_E. What you would do is you put that into its own image texture, and then hook the color up to the emission. Currently this will look weird, so let's just get rid of that. X is your universal delete key, and I think that's pretty good. F12 render, you can save it as you want, and yeah, thank you for watching. Same thing goes for back items as well. Back items, just do it to the normal armature or the spine. And thank you for watching.